In a recent op-ed in the New York Times, UC San Diego sociology professor John Skrentny describes a new workplace bias where employers treat race as a job qualification, a practice he says undermines the Civil Rights Act. Joining me to talk about the concept of racial realism are Andrea Guerrero, director of Alliance San Diego, and Professor John Skrentny, author of the book After Civil Rights: Racial Realism in the New American Marketplace. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
John, what's the difference between racial realism and affirmative action?
So affirmative action was about, it was having employers take race into account, but it was for the goals of justice and equal opportunity. It was about the worker and providing opportunities for workers. Racial realism is different. Racial realism involves the employer treating race as a real part of you, as something that is, as you said, a job qualification. And they're doing it not because it'll help you and your opportunities, they're doing it because they believe it'll further the goals of the organization. It'll increase profits, or if it's a government employer, it'll help the government provide the service, whether it's schooling or policing or whatever, more effectively.
Give us some examples of race being used as a job qualification, either among politicians, teachers. Who do you think does that?
I think it's especially prominent among police departments. Police departments all across the country believe that hiring and placing officers on the basis of race, matching the officer's race to the race of the residents of the neighborhood, will both provide more effective policing in the sense that the officers will know better when there's a real threat, they'll be less likely to use police brutality, and also in the eyes of the residents, they will see the police officer as having more legitimacy than they would be if they were another race. But this happens in schooling as well. The notion of providing racial role models for students is very common, even though the Supreme Court said you can't do it. It happens in hospitals with physicians, marketing, customer relations, retail. It's very common.
Well, Andrea, some of this sounds logical on the surface. Do you think there's a greater need for cultural competency? Where does that come into play here?
Right. So I want to remind everyone that in California, voters did away with affirmative action in 1992, and so we can't in California take race into consideration here in this state. What is happening is that employers and organizations are seeking the cultural competency to engage with a diverse constituency, and that is appropriate. We need individuals who understand the very diverse San Diego that we have and are able to communicate in the languages that we speak. That has to do with cultural competency. That is not necessarily embedded in a same race person. For example, I have hired over my many years as an employer people who have surprised me, who have the cultural competency because they grew up in a particular community that was different from their own racial or ethnic background.
Well, John, what's wrong with this practice here, to play devil's advocate? Why do you think it undermines salary compensation and even, as you said, the Civil Rights Act?
The problem is that if employers are matching the race of their employee with who they perceive to be the clients that they might be dealing with, especially if we're dealing with African Americans who on average have lower incomes and lower wealth, and if the compensation is tied to the wealth of their clients, the compensation for the employee is going to go down. So
for example, and a salesperson, is this because they're marketing to a group that maybe has a less disposable income? Link that up for me.
Yeah. So there was a study done by Diva Pager and Eric Rodsky that showed that black wages and white wages were actually pretty similar, except in occupations where the compensation really had a lot to do with the wealth of the clients. So real estate agents. Real estate agents tend to be hired and placed on the basis of race to deal with African American clients, and those neighborhoods tend to be less wealthy, and so those agents make less money than white real estate agents do.
In a sentence for each of you, Andrea, how do you fix this?
The intention of the Civil Rights Act was to create a world where everyone can reach their full potential. If we're going to do that, we have to create diverse environments. We have to acknowledge the importance of cultural competency. We have to include it in job requirements, and we need to hire the appropriate people.
And John, if you had a sentence on how to fix this discrepancy, what would you say?
I think Andrea is on the right track, that we need to keep jobs open for everyone and not have employers who are often trying to do the right thing, but not have them hire and place workers based on stereotypes.
All right, Professor John Skrentny and Andrea Guerrero, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.